Well, I think I've got you out to like maybe the furthest part of the farm, so hope everybody's having a good day. Like to welcome you. My name's Christy Sprague. I'm a weed scientist, and one of the crops I work on is wheat. And I'm going to talk about two projects that we have going that are funded by the Michigan Wheat Program. And the first one we're going to talk about is the study right behind me. This study, as you can see, there's a lot of signs out here. It is 32 treatments, and it's got a lot of different herbicide application timings and a couple different planting dates. So the goal of this trial is, one of the things that we've been seeing a lot of is it's been harder and harder to get some of those spring applications done. What are some of the challenges while you guys are trying to put your spring herbicides on? Cold, right? Yeah. In fact, I was looking at our weather in April and looking at probably we would have only had about 2/3 of the days in April that were above 50 degrees. And there was only about 14 days that were above 50 degrees and then did not have freezing temperatures at night. So it really is a struggle, because what happens when we have cold weather? The herbicides don't work as well, and plus we see a lot more injury. In fact, we tend to see quite a bit of injury with some of our ALS herbicides, things like Osprey, Osprey Extra, Powerflex, Affinity Broadspec. A lot of those can really set the wheat back, and in some cases when it's been cold we have seen some yield reduction. So it's just one of those things that we worry about. So one of the things we're trying to do is look at fall applications and a couple different timings, and then also see if that also correlates to maybe some injury in the fall if we have some colder temperatures, and also to see how well those weeds are dying in the fall, and do we need to come back with another spring herbicide. So in this particular trial we have two different planting dates. What we considered early, September 23rd, and then we planted about 4 weeks later on October 24th. And you can see the differences in height here. So we've got our later planted wheat, our earlier planted wheat. In general, this spring, there's been about a 2 to 5 inch difference between heights between the two. And we saw probably about a 5-day difference in flowering between the two planting dates. So just kind of keep that in mind. The other thing that we really wanted to focus on were these fall herbicide applications. So in general, the fall herbicides that we can apply, usually we want to wait for the wheat to be at the 2 to 3 leaf stage. And the fall herbicides that we can apply are things like Husky, Talinor, Helix, Affinity Broadspec. Those are all broadleaf herbicides. We can also apply things like Osprey and Powerflex, which are more of our grass herbicides. So what we wanted to do is kind of look at each one of those herbicides by themselves, applied in the fall, and then also looked at a couple different tank mixtures and looking at a grass herbicide with a broadleaf herbicide. In this case, we looked at Husky plus Osprey, and then also Husky plus Powerflex, kind of thinking that Husky is probably one of our more common broadleaf herbicides that are applied. So we made these applications basically when the wheat was at that 2 to 3 leaf stage. Again, our early planting was in September. When wheat hit the 2 to 3 leaf stage, it was about 2 weeks later from that early planting, so around the first part of October. We also wanted to wait a little bit and see what happened as the season wore on, got a little bit more tillering on that wheat, and that application was made about 6 weeks later for that first planting. Our second planting, remember I said it was at the end of October. In order for that wheat to hit that 2 to 3 leaf stage, it was actually around the first part of December. And we brought Gary out from retirement to do some spraying. We all took off and left him here with, I think, 37 degree or 32 degree weather.
I think it was 34 degrees that day.
So, unfortunately...
Tractor without a cap.
Unfortunately, we couldn't wait for that temperature to go back up, because the first part of December, we're just going down, right? So, we wanted to get those fall applications out and to see how well they worked. We also compared those applications to a spring application. So our spring applications happened at the end of April. So a couple things I want you to look at. So on this poster, you can see this fall application. This is our second application for that early planted wheat. You can see all the weeds that have emerged, right? So the wheat started to tiller. We've got things like horseweed or mare's tail, henbit, dead nettle, pennycress, some chickweed, also some annual bluegrass that was out there. The later planted wheat definitely had a lot fewer weeds, but those fall applications also worked well. Our spring applications, you can see here, we've got a lot more winter annual weed growth. You can see some purple dead nettle. There was a lot of annual bluegrass, a lot of those different weeds. And in general, our weed control, I would say, with those spring applications was just so-so. They were okay. It took a little bit longer. It wasn't what I would consider completely clean. If you look at this picture right here, this is our fall applied Husky plus Osprey. And we saw the same thing with Husky plus PowerFlex, where we had pretty much in April, pretty much clean, no weeds, and that's pretty much held out through this season. So our fall applications this year, we have some annual bluegrass out here, and the fall applied either having Osprey or PowerFlex in the mix, as well as some of the broadleaf herbicides, did a really good job at controlling many of our winter annual weeds that we had out in the field. One other thing I do want to mention is because it's been a drier year, we really haven't seen any summer annual weeds come up in any of our wheat. So between no rainfall and having very good wheat cover, a good stand, that really hasn't been much of an issue. So in general, our fall applications worked really well this year. We did see a little bit of injury from our fall applications that had Osprey or PowerFlex in there. That generally was some yellowing, maybe a little bit of stunning in the fall, but by the spring you couldn't tell where those applications were, so it outgrew it quickly. So what we're really going to pay attention to is the yield and how well each one of these treatments worked. And again, we've got 32 treatments out here, so it's those fall applications did seem to work well, even the ones that Gary sprayed on December 1st. So again, the yield's going to tell us a lot as far as if we had any effects on the wheat from those fall applications compared to the spring. Does anybody have any questions on this project at all?
Spraying.
Oops.
Is there anything that you can spray in the fall that doesn't carry over and hurt the clovers you seed in the spring?
Yes. So if you're seeding red clover, we've done some work and we've got a whole list of them. If you read each of the products, it'll tell you which ones will cause injury. But we've used things like Affinity Broadspec, Husky, Talonor, Axial Bold. We have used PowerFlex and Osprey. We do see a little bit of clover reduction, but if you make those fall applications, a lot of times we've been able to establish frostseed red clover and have it established from the fall applications. In the spring, the only products that you can use are Axial Bold and MCPA. So in our weed guide, we've got it pretty well spelled out which ones you can apply in the fall and not have any issues with red clover the next spring.
How late? I mean, you talked about spraying when it was 34 degrees.
Yeah.
Have we done that before? Do we think that's going to have a yield bearing?
We have not done that before. In general, I probably wouldn't recommend it. We did it just from the standpoint of making sure that we got those fall applications on. The temperatures and the wheat growth just weren't there to get them earlier. So we'll see what effect that actually has on yield. But that's a great question. And again, we're trying to see if some of those fall temperatures will also correlate to see if there's any differences in yield, or are we more impacted from some of those spring applications.
And what about freezing at night? I mean, I know with Roundup, you can't have it freeze. And what was the condition of that 34-degree application? Did it freeze a few days before? Actually,
the day before we were sitting pretty good. We were right around 50, and then the next day it dropped down. So unfortunately and then the temperature just continued to go down from there. Any other questions on that? All right. the next project that I wanted to talk about is something that we've been doing for the last couple years. This is our third and final year of this, and it's been really looking at wheat herbicide carryover, or what cover crops can you plant after you use a wheat herbicide that's applied in the spring. So we've pretty much looked at 10 of the different wheat herbicides that you can apply. So anything from our grass herbicides like Axial Bold, Osprey, Powerflex, to things like Culex, Stinger, Husky, Talonor, a lot of those, and apply them in the spring. And then basically after wheat harvest, we would come in and drill 9 different cover crops. The 9 cover crops that we've looked at are annual ryegrass, cereal rye, oats, dwarf Essex rape, crimson clover, Austrian winter pea, oilseed radish, mustard caliente, and red clover. Basically what we're trying to do is see if any of those herbicides will prevent the establishment of any of these covers. So we've done this at 3 different locations, and this will be the 3rd year that we are doing this. So we'll have 9 locations with different temperatures, different moistures, and different soil types. So we've had a site on campus each year. We've also had a site up at the Saginaw Valley Research and Extension Center up by Frankenmuth, and also down at the Kellogg Biological Station down by Battle Creek. So we've basically looked at this, and we have some general current recommendations, and again we'll be doing this 1 more year. In fact, our trial that we have is just up over that hill, and what we've done is we've sprayed things like Axial Bold, Talonor, Husky, Affinity Broadspec, Osprey, Osprey Extra, Powerflex, Culex, and Stinger. Made those applications in the spring. Once wheat is harvested, we'll wait a week, wait for some of that volunteer winter wheat to germinate. We'll spray it with Roundup, and then we'll plant our covers. And what we've found to date is many covers are able to establish after these herbicides have been applied. In general, we've had about between 85 and 118 days between that herbicide application and when those cover crops were planted. And moisture has ranged from almost 5 inches to 15 inches of rain. I think this year is going to be our big test on whether how well these herbicides break down without having moisture, and if it's going to affect some of the establishment of these cover crops. What we've done is kind of given you some general recommendations. Green Y is yes, you can go ahead and it is established well. We also have seen a couple years where we've had a little bit of injury, a little bit of, I guess, less biomass in general, but we've still seen some establishment, and we give those ones cautions. We have not had any covers that have not established, so in general we're seeing some pretty positive results. Where we kind of want people to have some caution is things like Husky with red clover. We'll generally see some whitening around the edges, and in some cases we've seen a little bit less biomass produced, but it has established. We only have had Austrian winter pea for 1 year, and we have some cautions on Talonor, Husky, and Affinity Broadspec. So those are the 3 products where it's going to be important to know that you might see some reduction in establishment or biomass. But in general, everything has established after these with the current conditions that we've had thus far. So this year I think it's going to be a really good test with our drier spring that we've had. So and all this information is on your handout in your packet, so this chart and everything. So does anybody have any questions at all? One other thing I do want to mention, we are seeing a lot more of grass issues in winter wheat. As you start to head out this way, take a look over in that back corner. You can see that kind of goldish tinged weed. That is actually rough stalk bluegrass. We've talked about that the last several years. We've done a lot of work. We're starting to see that come in, I think, on the edge, basically from the alfalfa field from behind. One thing you will notice, you will see a strip of that rough stalk bluegrass that is not controlled. Right next to it, you will see a strip that it is controlled. And what you're going to see there is those were fall applications of either PowerFlex or Osprey that controlled it well. So again, another positive for control or using some of these in the fall. And we've also seen very good annual bluegrass control, which was in this trial. So with that, I'll be up there at lunch if anybody has any more questions.